Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey there, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. I'm still bothered by the Emmys, and I'm particularly bothered because I just prepped this podcast and read all the Emmy recaps. It seems like I'm not wrong. Writer Michael Markowitz on Threads posted, "For the Emmy writers to keep sending Nate Bargatze out there with nothing but a tote board is WGA malpractice, Writers Guild. The sitcom writer slang term for this is a Nakamura. The story is that the Bob Newhart show had a joke about a Nakamura tape recorder that died, and the writers knew that there were a lot of Nakamura jokes to come, and they would surely die too. You don't go all in like this. It's unprofessional." I kept thinking about how Nate did arena shows over the weekend. Now, normally we hear that whoever's hosting the award shows usually does like a couple club sets on the down low and works out the material for the week, but Nate didn't even do a monologue. The whole thing was weird. Paul Scheer posted, "Why are we so obsessed with cutting off award speeches? Nobody's at home going, oh, get back to the presentations and montages. Less of the humans I like having a genuine moment." Well said, Paul Scheer. Variety's review. The Emmys' exciting wins were overshadowed by an uninspiring host and countdown clock gimmick. Yeah, I had recommended that we hold our Nate Bargatze stock. Now I'm wishing we had sold on Friday. We're definitely selling this week, I'll tell you that. Variety writes, from his opening monologue, Bargatze set an almost lackadaisical, apolitical tone for the evening. He lacked the enthusiasm and gumption needed to lead a 3-hour-long award program and often seemed stunned to be in the spotlight. Well, that's kind of his act. At one point, he even donned a dreadful Canadian tuxedo, which was like made out of denim. And like, I didn't get the joke until somebody pointed it out, which may have been a nod to Sydney Sweeney's controversial jeans ads. He was wearing that to introduce Sydney Sweeney. I didn't even put that together. Variety adds, it would have been nice if this and many of Bargatze's other jokes landed more clearly. Then they get into the timer thing that we talked about yesterday. Winners seemed flustered and rushed, almost racing through their big moments instead of being allowed to bask in something they've worked so hard to obtain. Amen, brother. This misstep became glaringly obvious as presenters droned on, eating up the time that could have been given to the winners. There was also the random caveat of Bargatze enlisting JB Smoove and 4 adorable children to represent the Boys and Girls Clubs, which lets you obviously confuse children coming out each time to help escort the presenters and winners off the stage. Yeah, did you catch that? The kids were like, what are we doing? Like, it just didn't work. And in the end, Bargatze announced the whole thing donation frenzy had been a bad joke. Of course, he and CBS were donating $350,000 to the Boys and Girls Club. After all, even though the speech club was very much in the red. If they wanted to look at wasted time, the call was coming from inside the house. Now, many things can be true at once. One, $350,000 is a very generous donation. No one made them make, so it's very generous. Two, how much was an ad on the Emmys? I tried looking that up. I couldn't find anything, so I won't speculate. The big winner of the night, Stephen Colbert. Early on, he got a standing ovation, standing center stage in a tuxedo when he looked all the part of the host. And then there were the nominees for Outstanding Talk Series. The winner, Stephen Colbert, he gave a great speech. Let's listen.
Children, thank you for this honor. I want to thank CBS for giving us the privilege to be part of the late night tradition, which I hope continues long after we're no longer doing this show. I got to thank these people, those people up there, the 200 incredible professionals. You are the pros from Dover, and I'm so proud to be one of you. We got to thank the people who have supported us for the last 20 years. Carrie Bialik, James Baby Doll Dixon. Personally, I want to thank my beautiful, brilliant wife, Evie, who's the real brains of the outfit. My 3 children, Madeline, Peter, and John. I want to dedicate this to my mom and dad, her mom and dad, and a young woman who should be here tonight, Amy Cole. That's right. 10 years ago, in September of 2015, Spike Jonze stopped by my office and said, hey, what do you want this show to be about? And I said, Spike, I don't know how you could do it, but I'd kind of like to do a late night show, a late night comedy show that was about love. And I don't know if I ever figured that out, but at a certain point, and you can guess what that point was, I realized that in some ways we were doing a late night comedy show about loss. And that's related to love, because sometimes you only truly know how much you love something when you get a sense that you might be losing it. And 10 years later, in September of 2025, my friends, I have never loved my country more desperately. God bless America. Stay strong, be brave, and if the elevator tries to bring you down, go crazy and punch a higher floor. Woo!
Democrats, you should call him. Now, if you're curious, who was Amy Cole that was referenced in the speech? Amy Cole was Colbert's executive assistant for many years. She passed away in March 2025. Her obituary read, working with Colbert for 16 years was more than a job to Amy. It gave her a purpose and provided an opportunity to showcase herself as an incredible teammate to everyone involved. She was adored by her entire Late Show work family, and she'll be greatly missed. Her cause of death was not publicly shared. However, one of the producers from the show had posted on Twitter at that time, F cancer. John Oliver, during his unnecessarily rushed speech, was bleeped out. We have found out what he said. John said, "Thanks to HBO, especially thanks to Casey and Elena. Thank you to our staff especially." He then said, "F you, Nate Bargatze. This is a lot of money for you. You can add an F to the swear jar as well. That's got to be enough. Thank you, goodbye," and then rushed off the stage unnecessarily. Website The Playlist did their best and worst. Under worst, they have the Boys and Girls Club embarrassment. I know I'm beating the dead horse here, but this annoyed me, in case you can't tell. They write, "This is Bargatze's shtick? To play with the donation clock all night long? And why do we waste time with JB Smoove propping up kids from the club when speeches are being cut? And who thought having the ticker displayed on screen next to the talent when they went over was a good idea?" Listen, giving to charity is a great idea, but this was a passive-aggressive bit that disrespected not only the charity, but the winners and their one moment in the spotlight, and it just got worse and worse as the night went on. They also added under their worst, Nate Bargatze, a super popular stand-up comedian. Bargatze was always a questionable choice to host. He's not industry enough to even throw out the casual jokes regular viewers would chuckle at, and he's never demonstrated consistent acting talent. Shockingly, his opening monologue was almost entirely setting up the aforementioned bit, either which he or the producers thought would get winners to keep their speeches short. As it started to fail, he began to flounder. At one point, he even joked he'd never be doing this again. That is true. Honestly, we had sympathy for Bargatze until we realized he and the production had no intention of giving up the penalty clock bit. He almost seemed embarrassed, and not in a comedic way, that it was going so badly. The LA Times was more generous. They wrote, "If your goal was to avoid insulted celebrities, social media outrage, or petulant notes from the White House, you could have done no better than hire Bargatze. His appeal is not so much mainstream, which is to say soft edge, as it is broad, something for everybody." However, the state of the world was addressed. Presenter Julianne Nicholson said of living in a post-apocalyptic bunker in paradise, great show if you've never watched it, she compared that show to current headlines as positive feel-good TV, again in the apocalypse. Jeff Hiller, who won supporting actor in a comedy series, thanked the writers for writing a show of connection and love in this time when compassion is seen as a weakness. Last week tonight, writer Daniel O'Brien dedicated the award to all writers of political comedy, while that is still a type of show that's allowed to exist. Jean Smart ended her speech saying, "Let's be good to each other. Let's just be good to each other." And Hannah Einbender finished with, "I just want to say, go Birds, F Ice, and Free Palestine." Time magazine's review was Nate Bargatze might be stand-up's biggest star, but he blew it at the 2025 Emmys. They made the same point most other articles did. My favorite review comes from my favorite reviewer, Daniel Feinberg in The Hollywood Reporter. He writes, "Given that I live in Los Angeles and work for an entertainment industry trade publication, I'm not supposed to admit this, but most of the country, not most, but probably more than some, has a particular perception about Hollywood. Writers and directors and producers and movie stars, you sometimes hear, live in a liberal bubble and emerge only for the occasional award shows, galas dedicated to famous people patting themselves on the collective butt, espousing left-wing talking points, and generally ignoring the possibility that the whole industry is having a corrosive effect on society, especially young people." I'll jump in there. The patting themselves on the back thing. Yeah, no surprise that The Studio won a lot of awards. I find that show very overrated. Daniel writes, "Very few minds are likely to have been changed by the Emmys." He then gets into the 45-second bit. "Instead, it was left to CBS, a network perceived as turning over its ideological keys to Donald Trump, to donate $100,000, and Bargatze, a compulsively wholesome comic from Tennessee, to donate $250,000. So the Boys and Girls Clubs of America ended up big winners on Sunday, thanks to a network eager to befriend the administration and to a red state comic, and no thanks to the Hollywood elite. Was that a narrative the producers or CBS or Bargatze, not a political comic in any way, intended to build a show around? Or just what happened? Hard to tell, but if you ask me to summarize the plot of Sunday's Emmys, that's the plot. Let it never be said that Bargatze and the producers didn't have a tough job, made even tougher by the precariously polarized nature of our country, perhaps more this week than ever before. They failed completely, but I'm not really sure what success would have looked like. Now, I don't agree with this next sentence. Don't worry, Joe Coy. You still hold the distinction of being the worst host in my not insignificant memory. That's Taylor Swift's fault. Joe Coy was way better than Nate. Come on, way better. I'm not saying better, I'm saying way better. Daniel says of the Emmys, it was an ill-conceived mess, punctuated by well-deserved wins and emotional and effective speeches, but rarely helped by Bargatze's consistently uneasy performance. I figured he was more likely to deliver a low-key charm, keep everybody comfortable, and spend very little time in the spotlight. Instead, he decided to make everybody uncomfortable, sometimes as a choice and sometimes just as a matter of course. Bargatze bungled the names of people and shows, rarely looked at home finding and addressing the correct camera, and somehow was given only one recurring piece of business, that tally of how much money Hollywood stars were trying to steal from kids. Wow. The only thing saving Bargatze and the show from its nadir status is that there was no sense of hostility in the room, which could not be said when Joe Coy was bombing at the Globes and decided to turn on his writers and then basically vanished from the show. Structurally, Bargatze's hosting was strange. There was no monologue. Instead, he repurposed his extremely funny George Washington sketches, etc., etc. It has to be said, nobody was played off. So if that's among your criteria, it was a success. Well, if there's anything Hollywood loves more than patting itself on the butt, it's taking money from children. Outstanding Comedy Series winner, The Studio. Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series, Seth Rogen, The Studio. Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series, Jean Smart Hacks. Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series, Jeff Hiller, Somebody Somewhere. Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series, Hannah Einbinder, Hacks. Outstanding Writing for a Comedy Series, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert beating out The Daily Show and Kimmel. Outstanding Variety Special Live, SNL 50, the Anniversary Special, beating out Beyonce Bowl, the Oscars, the Super Bowl halftime, and SNL's Homecoming Concert. Many people think the Homecoming Concert was actually better than the special. I kind of agree. Outstanding Scripted Variety Series, John Oliver beats out SNL. Outstanding Writer for a Variety Series, John Oliver's team beats out The Daily Show and SNL. On the red carpet, Lorne Michaels talked about the cast changes at SNL and said, the show has always brought people in from different ages and different generations, and it's how it revives itself. It's always hard when people leave, but there's a time for that. Our audience always stayed relatively young, and more so now with TikTok. Change is good, and the people we're bringing in, I'm really excited about it. Chloe Fineman said, when I saw how young the new cast was, I immediately got a laser. She might get a Forever 35 facelift, she joked. Bowen Yang told people this showed up over the weekend. Lorne Michaels encouraged him to stay. Bowen said, I've always gone by the instinct of, do I have more to do? And I feel like I do. Even Lorne and I talked about it, and Lorne was like, you have more to do. And that means a lot, because even I confessed to him, I feel like maybe the audience is getting sick of me. And he was like, that's not true. There's more for you to do. I need you. He expressed his gratitude towards Lorne Michaels, saying, that man has changed my life, and I owe a lot of my life to that show, and I love working there. The people are the best. I really love each of them so much. What I've always thought, what I think everybody knows, is that SNL is this boot camp, and that implies there's a next phase for you to train for something else. It's always a transitional place, and I think it's a launching pad. Even for people who stay on the show like Keenan, he's used that show to help expand his possibilities. I think that's going to be true for all the people who aren't coming back. I'm so excited to see what they do, and I'm excited for the new cast. Couple releases out today. Blonde Medicine and Ben Katzner are pleased to announce the release of his debut comedy special and album, both titled Supple Harlot. You'll find the video version on Ben's YouTube channel. Ben Katzner uses biting observational humor and skilled storytelling to discuss everything from his own adoption to reading romance novels in a desperate attempt to connect with and understand the world around him. Fellow comedian James Stanley summarizes the theme of Supple Harlot in 3 words, fat, black, adopted, which, according to Ben, honestly nails it. Out today on the 800-Pound Gorilla's YouTube channel, Craig Ferguson, I'm So Happy. CBS News has noticed that major U.S. comedians are set to perform in Saudi Arabia. CBS says they've been urged to speak out against the country's human rights abuses and not to be, quote, complicit in covering up the abuses of a repressive regime. Saudi Arabia will host the Riyadh Comedy Festival, which organizers say will be the world's largest comedy festival, September 26th to October 9th. I've talked about this in the past, and I think we're going to be talking about this one a lot as people start to notice. Many big-name comedians appearing. CBS has focused on Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, and Bill Burr. Human Rights Watch researcher Joey Shea told CBS News the Saudi government has invested billions into high-profile entertainment events like these in a deliberate effort to whitewash the country's human rights record and deflect from the egregious abuses that continue to happen inside the country. Those investments are part of the broader strategy to have people thinking about a comedy event, for example, rather than the soaring number of executions that are happening inside of the country. Tim Dillon has claimed on his podcast he's being paid $315,000 for a single show, and that some of his more famous colleagues would receive around $1.6 million for their appearances, writes CBS. CBS has contacted the publicists representing Build attendees Bill Burr, Mark Normand, Kevin Hart, Sebastian Maniscalco, Dave Chappelle, Louis C.K., Whitney Cummings, Tom Segura, Andrew Schultz, and Jim Jeffries, but has received no comment from any of them regarding their expected appearances in Saudi Arabia. W. Kamau Bell on Substack says he has no compassion for Charlie Kirk's death. Kirk would be fine with my lack of empathy for him, not that I needed his permission. That Substack is titled Charlie Kirk Said, I Can't Stand Empathy. Well, if he insists. Bell wrote, deep breath, everybody. We're now in deeper crap than we already were as a country. I certainly won't be gaslit into performatively pretending that Charlie Kirk was some sort of saint in death when he was actually just a truly awful person in life. I know what it's like to feel you are personally in danger for what you have said or done. I know what it is to be targeted by the people you disagree with. I also know what it's like when being surrounded by hostility is part of your job. When I see Charlie Kirk getting shot and killed, presumably for his beliefs, I'm reminded that I've imagined myself in that same position many times. Charlie Kirk was like a used car salesman at the end of the fiscal year. He was literally giving the hatred away. His slogan might as well have been, come through, I've got hatred for you. Charlie Kirk was a bad faith actor who spent all his time coming up with new ways to create more bad faith. He did it for money, for clicks, for giggles, for clout, and worst of all, he did it for his dear leader, Donald Trump. Bell says the best way to honor Kirk is for politicians to enact gun legislation, and says, ironically, Charlie Kirk would hate that. You'll find that piece on W. Kamau Bell's Substack, and that is your comedy news for today. See you tomorrow.